Mark, and welcome to another We Talk Chelsea podcast live on TKS TV. And we will be reviewing yesterday's game, Chelsea 4, Manchester City 4. And it's all drama when it involves Chelsea, especially in the last 7 days. Charlie, Temba, let's just go initial thoughts before we dive right in. It was an excellent game, wasn't it, Charlie?
Yeah, I mean, I think even for the neutral, it was a brilliant game. It was a great advertisement for the Premier League, end to end. Plenty of talking points, which I'm sure we'll go over in due course. And as a Chelsea fan on this side of the fence with my Chelsea hat on, it was definitely the best performance we've seen for a long time, and certainly this season. And probably for the last two or so seasons, by far the best performance and most dramatic match.
Yeah, it certainly feels like when it comes to opposition and level and standard of opposition, Chelsea seem to up their game tempo. It was complete, I think the word is Barclays drama at the moment. That's doing the rounds currently at the moment, but it's an absolutely fantastic game, end to end. If you're a neutral fan, it was a good game for a neutral, but it's certainly up and down for a Chelsea fan, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, I'll have to admit I kind of didn't watch the game live and had to see the highlights after the game, and it just looked like a terrific game. Unfortunately, I couldn't. But like I say, from the highlights I seen, minute 1 to 90, that looked like like Charlie said, the perfect advertisement to a Premier League game. Wrong decisions, referee mistakes, which I think we'll talk about, and goals galore.
Yeah, absolutely. The return of Anthony Taylor from his stint in the Championship, where he didn't even perform well in that game. I think Coventry City fans can attest to that. And he gets thrust back into the limelight in Chelsea versus Manchester City, arguably the biggest game of the weekend. So I think we'll start as ever, where we'll look at the starting lineup on this one. And, it was it looks Pochettino has found his kind of settled 11. We're seeing the kind of settled 11 that we have currently at the moment, the 4-2-3-1. In this scenario, Sanchez and goal, Cucurella, Silva, Disasi, James, Caicedo, and Fernandes holding. I think the only change really on this one was Conor Gallagher being moved into a number 10 type role, and I think Charlie, it's paid off significantly well. I think Pochettino's instructed Conor Gallagher to kind of press very, very high, and I think it paid off for Conor Gallagher especially, didn't it?
Yeah, I would say he was probably one of, if not our best player of the match yesterday. So that was certainly a positive. There weren't too many negatives, but I mean, just in terms of the starting 11, when that came out, it was pretty much as expected. And when you actually look at the squad available that we've got at the moment, I don't think there's anything I would have personally done any differently. I think Cucurella coming in was important. I think he's been on really good form, and again, I thought he had a really good game. Although the stats here don't seem to say so, but I personally thought he had a pretty solid game, especially with what he was up against. He didn't get up quite as much as he has in other games, but I think that was obviously drilled into him. Obviously, nice to see James back at right back. It's obviously he obviously favours this centre back pairing of Silva and Disasi rather than Badiashile or Carwell at the moment for whatever reason. I'm not sure if that was tactical or if that was or if this is what he figures out are the best centre back. And obviously Caicedo and Fernandes pick themselves. Palmer at the moment picks himself and Sterling as well. So I think I don't think if you actually look at what was available for us before the match and the formation that we've been playing recently and so on, I think it was our strongest 11 that we could have put. It's probably our strongest 11 we've had available so far this season, when you bear in mind James has been out for most of it as well. Along with other injuries and so on.
Yeah, and Adam saying scorching game for us neutrals, thoroughly enjoyable. Would have been extremely harsh if you had not taken something from it. Great penalty under some serious pressure. Yeah, we'll touch upon that back and forth and second half later on in the podcast. But Temba, it seems like it's interesting. Reece James has only started 3 games for Chelsea this season. Liverpool in the opening fixture, Spurs and Manchester City, and Chelsea haven't lost either of those games. I think there's been arguments from some fans, and from us on the podcast as well. We're saying we just want to see Reece James fit. We just want to see Reece James fit, and it's clear that when he comes into the side, he performs exceptionally well. How integral is it to having a fully fit Reece James back, and how fantastic is it seeing Pochettino managing his expectations, taking him off after an hour and giving opportunities to Malo Gusto?
Yeah, I think it's pretty evident in the last three or four, 3 seasons, I'd say. Our best form under Tuchel, our best form under Lampard even was when Reece James was fit. I think if you remember when we signed Ziyech, the summer we signed Ziyech, we went on a streak for like maybe 15, 16 unbeaten games at the start of that season. And it was when we started the back four, Chilwell, James, Thiago Silva. Who was the other centre back at the time?
Rudiger.
Yeah, Rudiger. Yeah. So even back then, when people were thinking, Lampard wasn't good enough, it shows you that those players were integral to how we played. And then obviously under Tuchel, we've seen when he changed to a back three, James and Chilwell contributed a lot going forward and defensively as well. And I think it's just more of a testament. We see that this season, even more so because Gusto has played really well, but James is able to just fill in and almost like he's never left, pretty much. So yeah, having him fit and start is a great thing because again, he's probably our best player at the club. I would say, in my opinion. And he is an outlet for like 90% of our play. The Thiago Silva or whoever's at centre back or left back can switch the ball to him, brings it down on his chest, is able to avoid a tackle and beat a player if he needs to. He's calm, collected. He can shoot, cross, take free kicks, good set play, strong 1v1 as we saw against Doku. So, like I say, I think it's important that he's fit, but I'm also glad we've got Gusto in case he isn't.
Yeah, and you made a valid point there. Jeremy Doku entered the game for Manchester City in a fine run of form, and he's kept relatively quiet by Reece James for the majority of the afternoon. And when you look at that starting lineup there for Manchester City, I know this is the We Talk Chelsea podcast, Charlie, but did you think, even in the smallest part, did you think we were going to get something from this game? I think before the game, we were both, all of us were saying, oh, it's going to be 3-0, 2-0. I think I was the only one last week that mentioned it's probably going to be a draw. So we should probably start tracking. To be fair, I said 1-1, so we'll leave it at that. But we should probably start tracking who actually gets these right. I mean, how fearful were you of Manchester City coming to Stamford Bridge yesterday, Charlie? Did you think it was going to derail what we've just kind of the momentum that we were building on?
Yeah, well, one win. You mean that momentum? But yeah, I mean, no. Point taken. I mean, when I looked at the lineup, to be honest, I just didn't see a weakness. I said I can't see how on earth we're going to penetrate these guys. Where's the weakness that we can exploit to score a goal? Obviously, that was famous last words. We managed to score more goals against City than we have anyone this season virtually. So that was obviously, I have to eat a bit of humble pie there. But yeah, I mean, if you just look at the 11 that they have there, there's very few players that you would go, oh, I'm not sure whether they can rely on that guy or whatever. There was enough threat going forward, especially with Doku and Haaland, and defensively pretty solid. But I don't know. I suppose it's just if you look at Chelsea's 11 and you look at City's 11, if it's one of these things, isn't it, where if the Chelsea team actually turn up, as individuals and a team collectively, they are as good as anyone out there. Even if you forget current form, if you take all that out the window and then you look at individuals and you go, if we got a 9 out of 10 Sterling and a 9 out of 10 Cucurella, as we know they can play, and a 9 out of 10 everyone else, we're not far off in that sense as individuals. Just collectively, they're terrible. So when it does all come together, as we've seen yesterday, and to an extent against Arsenal, it's probably the other match that you can highlight. I wouldn't say Tottenham was a bit of a funny one, but certainly against Arsenal up until the collapse, if you like. You can see what can happen if these guys all come together, and there is a lot of talent in that team. One thing I would say with the Chelsea 11, and it's one thing that I noticed, is obviously when you look to the bench, there is a massive gulf in class actually between this 11 that we can field here, and obviously we've still got a few other first teamers to come back who would probably challenge, like Nkunku, for example, would probably play over Jackson, I'm guessing at the moment, and there's maybe one or two other tweaks that we can make to that team that could make it a little bit better with players that we've got out injured potentially. But I would say that what we have on the bench, especially on the attacking front, like Broja, Mudryk at the moment, obviously hopefully one for the future there. Madueke, players like this. There is a bit of a gulf, to be honest, between those guys and these guys, and probably that's another reason why when we do have an injury crisis, it does affect us probably more than others. And obviously, when we've had one as severe as we've had in recent weeks, it's men against boys, quite literally. I find with that and the bench, and if you look at the bench that we had yesterday, there wasn't a lot on there. Again, there wasn't a lot of these players. I mean, Gusto's obviously, we've touched upon him. He's a great understudy for James and potential chop and change. That's as good as you're going to get for that at this level. But some of the other players coming on, I don't think you could compare Ugachukwu quite as with Caicedo, for example, at the moment, or Enzo. They're just not quite. They're not at that level. And if you look at Man City's bench, on the other hand, they've got Grealish and Kovacic. These are big hitting players. Who so they have a lot more squad depth than us. I mean, it's fairly obvious what I'm saying here, but it does. These injury crises, they do affect us a lot more than they do a team like City.
Yeah, I mean, you can see here just the injury crisis we have. I mean, City performing particularly well even without Kevin De Bruyne, and then John Stones here, and you can see that the injury list here. Whilst Wesley Fofana will probably be a starting player for Chelsea. Christopher Nkunku again would be a starting player, and arguably maybe Ben Chilwell, but despite the purple patch that we're finding Marc Cucurella in currently at the moment. Let's move on to the first half. It was an absolute topsy-turvy first half when you look at it in the grand scheme of things. Chelsea, when you look at the momentum on this one down here, we started pretty lively and then City came back into it. And as you can see from this momentum, especially in this first half, it's largely Manchester City and Chelsea, scoring goals against the run of play, with the exception of the goal by Thiago Silva. When you look at we'll talk about the first contentious decision, of which there are many. The Erling Haaland penalty was given against Marc Cucurella, given a yellow card in that scenario as well. I've seen people generally pretty split on this. Some people saying it wasn't a penalty. Some people saying Marc Cucurella fouled Haaland. Some people saying Haaland fouled Cucurella. But Temba, when you look at the footage back, do you think that it should have been given as a penalty, or do you think it's kind of 6 of one and half a dozen of the other?
Well, I think they're both tugging at each other at the end of the day. I think Cucurella's got done by Haaland's cleverness. I think another soft penalty that was given to City, to be honest. I think, we've seen against Man United where they had that really soft penalty. Rodri, I think he went down, really was slightly held. So it's one of those things you have to consider. Haaland is 6'4", probably maybe 180 pounds. Cucurella is 5'6", and maybe 140 pounds. Is that enough really to foul him? I don't think so. But at the end of the day, I think it's one of those things where I don't like this rule. There is contact, so you can't overrule the decision unless it's a clear and obvious error. So therefore, it is a penalty because the referee was it the referee that gave the decision?
Yeah.
There was a little bit. Yeah, it was a little bit of confusion, but then it was, obviously each decision that's been given for a penalty will be looked at by the VAR. So,
Yeah,
and that initially Anthony Taylor gave it as a penalty, and then VAR confirmed it. But
yeah.
yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, I've asked the people in the comments as well what they think. Did they think it was a penalty? Because it's very difficult for me. I think, in my personal opinion, if I'm going to take my Chelsea hat off, I can see why it was given, but also I don't think it was a foul by Kukurea, and I don't think it's a foul by Haaland. I think they've just done the exact same thing to one another. It's been given a penalty. I genuinely think it was a weird decision. It should have just the game should have just played on. Maybe that's me being biased. Please, Charlie, Tim, tell me I'm an idiot if
I
I'm
think.
being biased in that scenario.
Yeah, I think it's not. I think it's more the VAR and how I've reflected on it is that if it wasn't given a penalty, they would never have given it as a penalty. VAR wouldn't have, even if they looked at it, they wouldn't have given it a penalty. It was because it was such a 50-50. So it's just unfortunate that Taylor gave the penalty that they couldn't overturn it. It's not one where if he hadn't have given it, they'd have gone, oh, let's check the VAR and bring it back and given it or whatever. It wasn't because there just wasn't enough in it. And again, it wasn't clear and obvious because it was such a 50-50. It's the fact that he's given it. And that's why it's surprising in a way, because with the VAR there, you think that you would think that these referees would have that in the back of their minds, that if they're not quite sure or they think it might be harsh, they just don't give it because they know it'll be overturned anyway. If they've got it completely wrong, then they'll blame it on VAR. The fans will blame it on VAR. VAR don't give it. So it's surprising but they're obviously told to officiate the match as if VAR isn't there. I'm guessing that's probably the way that they have to be told to do that. They can't kind of rely on VAR too much, otherwise the game would just no decision would just ever be made. It would just be in VAR's hands, wouldn't it, all the time?
I think with the introduction of VAR, I think the standard of refereeing as a whole has got worse because there's an over reliance on VAR to get you out of a bad situation. So they're not correctly observing the game. I mean, maybe this is just me thinking, Andrew Taylor, Chelsea, person that should not given as many decisions in the last 5 seasons that he should have done. Red cards, penalties, handballs, all that nonsense has gone against our way. But I mean, feel free to disagree with me, Temba, Charlie. Do you think the standard of the refereeing as a whole in the Premier League has gone down with the introduction of VAR?
I don't know. I still think it was bad before. I don't know if it's gone down or not. I think we've just seen more pros and cons with VAR, if that makes sense. I think we've seen more blatant decisions go one way or the other. So I don't think the standard of refereeing has really changed over the course of many years, because we would see bogus offside and silly fouls given or not given in that sense. What I don't like what I don't like about refereeing is actually I wanted to bring up is the linesmen. I think they don't impact the game enough sometimes, or go against the referee, and the referee doesn't actively involve them too much in making a decision. And I suppose it's the thing of where the referee is the main guy that everyone listens to. But like, say for instance that Gallagher foul, I don't know if you saw it in the build up to, was it the
penalty?
Second half.
Yeah.
Is it the Gallagher foul in the second half when they scored on the counter attack with Haaland?
No, they got a throw in and
the one leading up to the penalty. Gallagher got. This is one thing that annoyed me. Gallagher got taken out and he was on the floor, so they should have kicked it out on the build up to that. And then was it Reece James knocked out?
Reece James, went down holding his head, and the protocol is if there's a head injury or if there's something to do with the head, you need to stop the game.
So there was 2 of them down. I'm guessing it was Dizazi or Silva, one of those 2. I'm guessing. Both went for the same header or whatever. So again, so you've got 3 Chelsea players on the deck essentially, and and at no point does VAR look at that. Because normally they'll look at the build-up play, won't they, to these situations as much as the actual situation itself. I
don't think head injuries is under the remit of VAR though. I don't think it's considered. I think if there's like a foul in the build-up or something along those lines, but head injuries, I think it's at the discretion of the referee, and that's the issue. I think that's probably the issue. I don't think it's under their remit, but it's it is a bit silly, and I think I think you
Can I
do
just
make a valid. Yeah,
bring back? So it was the third goal. I just double checked. It was
Oh,
when
sorry.
it was the third goal
the
that
push on the
Haaland scored.
back.
Yeah, he pushed on the back, and he was right in front of the linesman there. And I'm thinking, if any other sort of, if that's the referee there, obviously he's clear and he can see it. But if the linesman has seen that, why has he not alerted the referee and said, this is a foul, give it that way? So
Exactly. Exactly.
I think the
I have
problem
to.
is,
I thought it was a foul, like in the build-up, and you see it as well when you look at when I watched the highlights back of the game as well. They don't even show it a match of the day. They don't show the foul.
yeah,
They completely pushed that aside, and they took it from the throw-in as well to kind of maybe misdirect it from that. But I think you're right. It's a push in the back, blatant. It's right in front of the linesman, and even Conor Gallagher is like turning to him and saying, "You're gonna give the foul for whatever reason."
yeah,
Sorry, Charlie, I
I
interrupted
think,
you though.
yeah, I think with the linesman thing as well, like you are right, and it seems obvious, but when you actually done that job essentially, and I'm far from professional, but I've obviously done it on a Sunday league level. You're really
We all
not
have.
looking at you're really not looking at the ball that much. You're more looking at where the lines are. You're making sure that you're in line with
Telling
the
your
last
man,
defender,
telling your
and
defender that you're playing him on.
yeah, exactly. And also and obviously like making sure that you look at the board purely for throw-ins and who got the last touch on things and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
you're not really like you're concentrating so much on that you probably just you might see in the corner of your eye something, but you can't be sure. So you do rely more on the ref. The ref's job is purely to follow the ball around, isn't he, basically? So yeah.
yeah. Adam's saying it on this. The penalty. First opinion when watching it was a very soft penalty. Haven't watched it back. You can see why it was given. I think we all agree on that. There could be a valid argument. Haaland committed the initial foul, and I think that's our thing that we have. But let's move on to the Chelsea. And usually, when the goal went in, it was like Haaland scored 1-0. I think Temba, you were in the midst of going out to a concert. I say a concert. And he went, that's it, game over. City to steamroll us. And then all of a sudden, 6 minutes later, against the run of play, Chelsea score a set piece. When was the
yeah,
last time that happened? Chelsea scored a set piece. Conor Gallagher managing to, it didn't make it past the first front post, but that's not the point. Thiago Silva steamrolling in his position from the penalty spot to score and re-establish a lead. And I think it was deserved, wasn't it? And it's just great to see that Thiago Silva, even at 39 years old, is capable of those big match moments. But it definitely kind of felt with that goal going in, it felt like it didn't feel like, oh, this is completely against the run of play. But it kind of felt different to games before, because games before I went, now, even if it overscored, we're still just going to go get pumped again. But it kind of felt a little bit different. Did you get that impression, Charlie, when you were watching that when that goal went in? We're still in with this chance.
Yeah, and I think it was really crucial that we got the goal so quickly after their one as well. That if we would have gone in half time 1-0, they probably could have seen the game out quite easily. City, game managed it a little bit, gone on the back foot a little bit, and stuff like that. But and obviously had a pep talk at half time. Excuse the pun. But yeah, I mean, it was a great header, wasn't it? And it looked like something they'd practiced on the training ground, because there was a couple of block offs that they were doing as well. I think with Haaland, I think someone blocked Haaland off, which is quite funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think it was just, if you look at it, it was 4 minutes after the penalty, and obviously heads can drop, and you do
Yeah.
need your big player, these experienced players who have been there and done it before. And I no doubt Silva in his career has been involved in big and bigger matches than this, and has seen how the tide can turn really quickly, as it did in this situation. So yeah, kudos to Silva.
Yeah, I think Tem, do you agree that you are we seeing the start of a different style of Chelsea team? Because last season, I think if we'd have conceded the first goal, we'd have completely crumbled. Are you seeing a kind of spirit within the team? The belief that they are capable of beating anybody on any given day.
yeah, and I think that sort of earmarked it. The fact that we actually went 2-1 up. You know, um, what can I say? Like before, when we went 1-0 down, you only saw one result coming, and like I say, there with Man City, especially being probably the best team in the world, your confidence will be completely dejected if you've worked hard for the first 20 minutes or for it to be undone. So, what we've seen in the past, and yeah, and like I say, I think it's just more of a testament of the character we're starting to build, a bit of resilience, which goes a long way, especially in a big game like this. You need to sort of fight against adversity, and um, thank God we scored a goal because again, from set pieces, I don't think we've scored a goal all season from set piece, have we? Not to my knowledge.
No.
Literally, I not to my knowledge, but the last set piece goal that I remember Chelsea scored was
Wesley Fofana, I
Yeah,
think.
Wesley Fofana against
yeah,
Leeds. Yeah, I was going to say that
a
Yeah.
last
long, long,
season.
long time ago, and it's fantastic to see. Um, yeah, it's crazy, like the fact that we do that, and then all of a sudden, the opinion Chelsea, you know, Stamford Bridge is back. It's livened up a little bit again, and you can see the press, the press that I was can't even get my words out. But the thing I was really impressed with yesterday is the level of press that the front four were doing. With Nicholas Jackson, Cole Palmer, Conor Gallagher, Sterling, and even down to like Enzo Fernandez as well was pressing. It created some space within the midfield. It forced City to try and play out from that midfield side, but the level of press to try and turn over, and it worked with Cole Palmer. Getting a little bit lucky with a through ball for Reece James to get it, and then Raheem Sterling celebrating in front of the Man City fans was a bit. I enjoyed that moment when he ran over to that corner. When he's there down in the shed end, right in that away section, giving it the calmer down. I really enjoyed that moment. And then Chelsea 2-1 up. I was on Dream Street. I thought, holy crap, this isn't going to happen. Surely we're not going to go that. And I think the key thing was we just need to get to half time. We just need to get to half time. We just need to get to half time. And then 46 minutes in, it looks like from a set piece again, our downfall once again. A cross in from Bernardo Silva into Manuel Akanji. Initially, when you were reviewing the goaltender, it looked like that. People were saying it was potentially Axel Disasi with a bit of fault, but it looked like it was potentially Enzo Fernandez that was moving out away from this man. He was the person that was marking that left Akanji free to score the goal. It's a real worry Chelsea on set pieces, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to touch on this actually. I think it's a collective thing defensively, and it may be more of the reason why he plays Cole because we do lack height from set pieces. And if you notice, I think Gallagher was one of the players as well who fell asleep at that corner.
Yeah.
Thiago Silva sort of pushed out, and he sort of I think sometimes almost forgets he's that good that he needs to lead the team. He when he shouts, you see it's like an aggressive thing. Like sometimes we've played with certain players. I know I'm guilty of it myself, where I expect better from my teammates, but you almost forget that you need
Don't
to
I know
lead
it?
them rather than. Huh? Sorry.
Don't I know it?
You need to lead your teammates rather than tell them what they're not doing right. If you know what I mean. Yeah, and I think we see it with Chelsea, obviously, with the lack of experience we have, and um, you see Conor Gallagher. I think last week against Dyer, he fell asleep there as well, and there was another instance I can't remember a few weeks ago where he fell asleep from a set piece. So I think it's
Yeah.
something we need to work on as a team, because the marking was really off, and Akanji had acres of space to put that wherever he wanted, and Sanchez couldn't really do anything about it, I suppose. But I think it well worked from City, but poor defensive from Chelsea.
Yeah, and it could have been a lot worse, especially when Haaland played that really through ball. Definitely showing latched onto a through ball, and he thought he was going to make it two. Was it 1-1 that point where it's going to go to 2-1? And Haaland,
Yeah.
and it's absolutely fantastic save from Robert Sanchez. Thiago Silva was caught napping in that scenario, and I think it's just an example of his legs being gone. Charlie, just to, I want to deviate a little bit. There's rumours that Thiago Sanchez, because his kids are really settled in London and he's playing for the Chelsea academy, there's talks about him potentially extending his stay for another season. If it's you, with the level of centre backs we have, Badiashile, Disasi, Fofana, Colwell, if you're Maurizio Pochettino, Do you keep Thiago Silva for another season, or do you potentially say, okay, well, we'll sign you again, but just know your minutes are going to be reduced? Or do you
Yeah.
think he needs to go? Because apparently his kids don't want to move back to Brazil.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just something for the end of the season. But yeah, he's obviously they've got to match his expectations. We can't. I think he's now at the stage of his career where he can't have the divine right to play in every single match. It's actually surprising that we've. I mean, it's obviously a credit to him that he can keep up the fitness, but it's also surprising with like you say, the amount of talent we do have that we don't mix it up. I don't think for these sort of matches, but especially for I was quite surprised at the Brentford match the other day when he played that one. And we did have options. At the time there were options, because if you look at it as well, we don't have to play. We've got Cucurella now, who looks to be a fairly solid left back. But yet we continue to always accommodate Silva no matter what, and we end up playing Colwell and Disasi, which means one of them is going to have to play out of position, or in a weaker position, essentially. Now we've got James back. It's going to be really hard to accommodate all these players, which is a nice problem to have. But I think it's it's obviously. I think with Silva, he's kind of been. He probably wouldn't have been expected to play this many matches actually with the squad. It's just that they were nearly all been injured all the time. So now that a lot of these players are coming back, I think you will see him drop to the bench. It'll probably be a bit like when Vincent Kompany will finish his career at City, where he would still play in certain matches. He often played in bigger matches. To be fair, they just needed that steady head, if you like, and that sort of stuff. But I think in the long run, it's. Like I say, if he wants to stay, then great. But he's going to have to. Obviously, his expectations are going to have to go down. And but he will be a brilliant coach. He's a great guy to obviously have around. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And I don't think he's I don't think he's the sort of player who's going to cause a problem. He's not like Cristiano Ronaldo at Man United, where he can actually cause the downfall of a whole team. I don't think he's got that in him. He's just not. He doesn't seem to have that kind of attitude. You know what I mean?
Tim, do you think is that something you agree with, given that what you just said in terms of his shouting on the pitch? He needs to be shown as a leader in that scenario, but he's more kind of a shouty, not follow me kind of person, but you need to do this, you need to that. Could you see him potentially moving into a coaching role at Chelsea, or do you think it's not something that could be on his radar? Would you want him as a coach at Chelsea?
If he wanted to, I think he would be a great addition for us. I think he still has a lot to offer. Just really depends on him how far he takes his coaching career, or beyond his playing days. What does he want to do? Does he want to just be a staff member of the club? Does he want to maybe go into management himself? Become first team manager? Do you want to work with the under-21s? I'm not quite sure, but in terms of his performance against Man City, I think he was good from what I've seen. Like you say, legs are a bit gone, and I think Disasi is probably not the best player that complements him. I think Disasi is also a player who doesn't really engage in tackles, if you know what I mean. He sort of backs off from what I've seen anyway, and he almost waits for the opponent to get to a close point, then puts in a tackle, which I think doesn't suit Silva, especially if Silva's the exact same sort of player, if you know what I mean. So it kind of leaves you the gap between midfield and defense just getting wider and wider, or giving the chance for the attacker to get close to goal. You saw Haaland, I think it was the Robert Sanchez save. That was a brilliant example of both of them just backing off. Last week we've seen it with Son as well. I think one of them has to engage.
Really familiar, isn't it?
Burnley. Yeah, Burnley as well. I think was it Burnley? Yeah, I think it was Burnley. Their goal where the attacker just literally dribbled past. I think it was the left back. Yeah, it might have been Colwell, Silva, and Disasi. He just went past through all of them, and none of them put a tackle in. I think it's a running theme we're going to see. So it would be interesting to see maybe if when Fofana's back, who's going to play, because Badiashile, I think he's kind of almost the same. So it's really about finding the best partner. And is Thiago Silva going to be much more important for us in this season going forward? I'm not sure. I want to throw that question to you, really.
I can definitely see once we get through this run of games, I think, we've got Newcastle away. I would be very surprised if he doesn't start in that game. Newcastle have a lot of injuries leading into that game. We should, in theory, take advantage of that and try and get 3 points at St. James's Park. But I think I can see him playing that. I think over the Christmas period, I think we'll see a bit of rotation. As standard, really, and I think that could be the emergence of Colwell playing as a left centre back, with Silva being rested and then putting into for the big games where you need that kind of player, because fundamentally what Colwell needs and Badiashile needs and Disasi needs is game time. It's just what they need to do. In order for them to get any better, they need to play. That's what it is. And you can't have a player, as much as I love Thiago Silva, gatekeeping that position in the long term. Eventually, I mean, personally, I'd love to see him as a coach. Maybe I'd love to see him next year, but that's probably me with my nostalgia hat on, really, like thinking in that scenario. But if he's willing to do like a John Terry towards John Terry's last season where he wasn't playing as much, then by all means, it'd be good to have him as an option when we need it. Let's move across to the second half in this scenario. Chelsea very, very slow outside the blocks, conceding within 90 seconds. Haaland as well scoring in the background there. And it looked like to me that was, whilst it was the foul that we previously mentioned in the back of Conor Gallagher, it was very open in midfield. And I think we've had a pretty solid midfield the last few games, but to this game was end to end. And the midfield wasn't really operating as well as it should have, Charlie. It looked like Caicedo probably had one of his worst games in a Chelsea shirt, got completely turned out. I think it was by Bernardo Silva, I believe, or was it Haaland? It was one of those two. It was in a very similar area where both those incidents happened, which resulted in the goal. The midfield kind of lacking, in the first 90 seconds, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think it at that point as well in the match, I was just like, this is just such a typical young player performance, in the fact that we've this is schoolboy stuff, conceding just before half time and just after. It's almost like the two times that you shouldn't be conceding. Anyone can tell you that. I think the problem is I seem to remember we came out of the traps actually quite quick out of that second half, and we thought we'd start on the front foot and basically just committed way too many bodies, and then got completely overturned. That's kind of the way that I saw it, is that we went straight out the blocks, and then, like you say, as soon as that's the kind of problem with it. I mean, it's the problem when you're playing against teams that can press, especially teams of this quality, where they can actually pick up loose balls and tackle you higher up the pitch, is that when they do that and when it does work, they can punish you so easily. And it was, what was it, 3 passes and the ball's in the back of the net. Didn't take a lot, for them to get to the position where they won the ball, which was probably the halfway line or just before, and then they've just straight in 1, 2, 3, and it's a goal. And there's not really much you can. Yeah, there wasn't much after they got after they'd won that ball back. There isn't really anyone to blame. You can't look at, is it Cucurella who ended up in the net with was it Disasi with Haaland?
Reece James.
Was it Reece James? Yeah, I mean, you couldn't pin much of the blame on him. He was there. It was just you're against one of the world's best poachers in a position he absolutely loves. Like, he's not going to miss that. It doesn't matter who he's up against. That duel, he's always going to win. The ball was on a 10 pence or whatever they call it. What could you do? And that just proves, that's when you're playing against quality opposition in this league, who can counter attack like that, and can win the ball high up. You haven't really got much of a chance, and I suppose that's just the risk that you take when you play this kind of football.
And when you look at the momentum side of this, the second half here, it clearly shows very slow at the gaps. But look at the back and forth, and forth compared to the first half. It goes to show that Chelsea really didn't give up. Was it more Chelsea not giving up, Timber, from what you saw, or do you think it was a case of Manchester City not necessarily defending to the standards that we expect of Manchester City? How much can we put in the hands of Manchester City not performing defensively and Chelsea performing exceptionally well?
I think it's 50-50, because you have to think we're at home. From what I seen anyway, that Stamford Bridge crowd was behind them. So it kind of maybe gave the impetus on the players to actually do well and perform well, because lately what we've seen at Stamford Bridge is not very good atmosphere in terms of supporting the players. And I think it's had an adverse effect on our performances at home, obviously with our record. And I thought last night was one of those games where you could see like everyone was up for it, and 3-2 down, it didn't, because it was so early in the second half. The players probably felt like they could still get back in this. There was something to salvage from that, and obviously so did the fans. So in a sense, it's not just Man City. I think we gifted them some goals as well. They gifted us some goals as well. So it was a 50-50 thing. But I think what I'd put it more down to is Chelsea's resilience. Like I say, I did not expect them to be this resilient, but I think it showed, and we got our rewards for once, which was a good equaliser.
Yeah, and when we talk about resilience, Charlie, we look at the equaliser. Nicholas Jackson, a shot on the edge of the box from Conor Gallagher, palmed into the pathway by Edison into Nicholas Jackson. I think Nicholas Jackson, before the Tottenham game, he probably been like Bambi on ice in that scenario, trying to get the ball under control. But he was on the ball. He was on the mark first of that ball to get ahead of the two Manchester City defenders and do the thing that we need him to do in that position. It was a relatively quiet game, but you want your striker to take those opportunities. I don't think he had many other opportunities other than that, did he?
No, he didn't do a lot, to be honest, before that. And he was he tried his luck a few times in the first half, trying to take on, like he likes to take on players. And it's just like, I think the commentator, it was Carragher was commentating on Sky, and he was yeah, Jackson, you can try that, but you're going to learn in this league. You can't just get the ball and start running with it against this quality, especially Walker. You're not going to beat him on a one-on-one. It's just not going to happen with his pace. One thing I will say about Jackson, I don't know if you thought this, but I almost thought, why has he controlled this? Why has he not just take it? Because he could have taken it first time. And he seemed to, I don't know how, but he got away with it somehow. The Man City defence was very slow to read that. You think that if you take a touch in the essentially 8 yards out, it's around the penalty spot, I'm guessing, where he took that ball. And you think that he would have got closed down pretty quick, so someone would have tried to block the shot. They barely got near him. He was in a position that he barely got near. Obviously, he took it well. The finish was good. But yeah, again, you go back to resilience. Jackson didn't ever give up, did he? He never, he didn't get frustrated or anything like that. He just made sure that he was in the right positions to pick up the chances, and he got his reward.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think one thing I've been critical about Nicholas Jackson is his kind of movement. And whilst his movement wasn't there, he probably shouldn't be taking on Kyle Walker. Pace for pace. He's not that player. I don't think Nicholas Jackson. I think when we watch him, he's not that dribbler type player at all. I don't know if you saw some of the videos of him after the goal. I think he's got a bit of a shit house in him. Do you know what I mean? When he's like winding up the City fans and the Tottenham fans, like he's giving it the shushes and all that nonsense. I think we can see a shithouse, and you do need that kind of ego from somebody at the top of the pitch. I just wish he wasn't sometimes a bit like Bambi a lot of the time. But he took the goal well, and it kind of got us back into the game 3-0. But unfortunately, we then went behind for the third time. And it looks like it looked like a tired leg stuck up on Thiago Silva. And it was interesting. One thing I didn't even consider, but goalkeepers apparently at the top standard don't particularly like it when defenders try and block shots, especially with their pinged along the floor like that in wet conditions. It looked like it would have been easily covered by Robert Sanchez. Unfortunately, it's a bit of bad luck in Chelsea's against Chelsea in that scenario, going into the net and making it 4-3. And I thought at that point, 86 minutes when Rodri had scored that goal, I think at that point, Temba, you would have thought game over, surely.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch upon the Jackson equaliser actually, and sort of add more context to what Charlie said when he said he's surprised Jackson didn't shoot first time. If we've seen a lot of Jackson's first time shots, they get over the bar. You saw it against in that Spurs game where he scored the hat trick and he was a bit overconfident and thought, okay, next one I'll take it on first time, and he shot that into Rosette. I think, was it Southampton at home or someone at home, where he missed from 8 yards out again, took that first time over the bar. There's quite a few of his shots, like he just skyrockets them when he doesn't, compose himself and then take the shot. And I think maybe at that point it's sort of in his head, like, okay, let me not hit this first time in case I overhit the shot. Let me take a touch. Maybe it'll send the defender down or the keeper down, and then let me try compose myself and take the finish. And I think it just went under Edison, if I remember correctly. So yeah, again, good for him. I think he needs just that run now to keep going good, because as we've seen in the rumor mill, we are looking at a top tier striker. Who knows, that will be maybe Osimhen or whatever, as we've seen with. I don't know if you guys have seen the Mikel podcast.
Yeah. The route, for the benefit of the people that haven't seen, Osimhen was talking about how he had two T-shirts or two shirts growing up when he was back home in Nigeria, and one of them was a Chelsea shirt and the other one was a Manchester United one. So it'd be intriguing to see. I can't see Osimhen coming to Chelsea. If we do, fantastic, but I can't see it personally. Sorry, Tim, I interrupted.
Yeah, and so it's good for him to start picking up this form, because I think we've got big fixtures coming up still. We've still got to play Newcastle, obviously go to Old Trafford. We've got Brighton coming up soon as well. So yeah, I think as long as he carries on scoring, if he does disappear in the game, that's fine. Just as long as you impact the game in some sort of way, and he did yesterday with a goal. Speaking of the Rodri goal, I think every keeper hates that sort of thing when a defender just sticks his toe out, and unfortunately, Thiago Silva sort of stuck out like a banana foot, where he just completely went the opposite way into the goal. Unfortunate, but at the same time, I think it's a lesson we've learned with how how Jackson scored. If you don't take a shot, those scenarios don't happen. Even though Gallagher took a straight shot, it palmed back out to Jackson, is able to tap in. So hopefully we learn from things like that. Just keep taking shots, and especially shots that will test the keeper or unnerve the keeper. Not try and maybe always go for the top corner or the spectacular sort of thing. Just put it somewhere on target through defenders, because those things do happen. And yeah, I think that was a testament to Man City. They showed like why they are champions, and I think at that point I thought it was game over. I was watching the game at that point, and I was just like, I've just tuned in sort of thing. 1 minute later, I see Rodri scored, and it just sort of deflating, thinking, this is going to be a long season. So yeah, that was my thoughts on that Rodri goal.
Yeah. I think, Charlie, it was interesting, like Tem thinking that the game was over, and I myself thought, okay, game over, absolute game over. But there's one person in the stadium that didn't. That was Mauricio Pochettino. He hooked Moises Caicedo off and brought on Armando Broja to try and impact the game. And impact the game he did, winning a penalty in the 92nd minute. Bizarrely, both of you, I don't know if you see it. I've seen rumblings on things like TikTok where the people they're not even City fans saying that it's not a penalty. It's the most clear-cut penalty that I've seen in this game. Broja threw the dummy, and then Ruben Diaz just slid through and just took him completely out. And we have to talk about the composure of, if there's anybody who's going to step out, if you were going to write a storyline when it comes to football, Cole Palmer purchased from Manchester City for £45 million in the summer. Manchester City through and through. His family, Manchester City through and through. 92nd minute on a scuffed up penalty spot that he got yellow carded for in the first half. Cool as a cucumber, slotted it home against Edison, equaling up. Fortunately, taking him a point from the game, Charlie. Cole Palmer, we've talked a lot about him so far, but Cole Palmer yesterday was absolutely phenomenal, wasn't he?
Yeah. I mean, he's not. That's what I like about this kid at the moment, is that every single time I've seen him, he's always had a good game. I've never seen him have a bad game. Really composed and maturity beyond his years, as they say. But I mean, going back to that penalty, I just thought it was. I mean, it was really schoolboy, wasn't it? Just giving that penalty away. I couldn't quite believe it in the manner that they did. It wasn't. I mean, like you say, I mean, I can't believe anyone would say that wasn't a penalty. That was Stonewall.
Stonewall, yeah.
There's no doubt about it. But I mean, just the tackle. It was. I suppose like you say, I mean, you watch it in slow motion, it looks a lot more cynical than it was. He probably was just trying to get a block in, and it was just too late to pull out basically. And Brozier, for whatever reason, managed to trick him. But it still looks so silly and rash, and especially that time of the game. But then I suppose you do throw yourself into challenges like that time of the game. You know, it's 8 yards out or whatever, and opportunity to get an equaliser. He probably thought, I need to throw my body at it to block it. Suppose you look at it that way, but and then the penalty itself. I mean, people forget as well. City players were absolutely all over Taylor. They were in Palmer's face. They were around the penalties, but they were doing everything in their power to put him off and to delay the penalties from being taken. You know, to make sure that he had the maximum time to deliberate which side he was going to go. You know, he's taking the penalty against someone who he would have taken penalties against in training just a few months ago, who would have known how he takes penalties and so on. So yeah, I mean, to finish it off with such coolness, and even just to take the ball, because I think it was before that, wasn't it, where Poch recently, I don't know if it was this week or last week, had said that there's no penalty taker in Chelsea's team. It's just they're just going to decide on who wants it or what the mood is at the time.
Yeah.
And obviously we still had other players on the pitch who would have qualified to take that penalty. Because Sterling never got subbed off, did he? Sterling? So no. He was still there, and obviously he's taken penalties in the past. You know, I'm sure there's other players on there who could have as well. So yeah, the fact that he had the guts to take the penalty against his old club, and you got to think as well, like he's got a lot to gain, but he's also got a lot to lose in the sense that Man City fans would have been laughing all the way to the to the pub on the way home. If it would have been him who would have missed the penalty, they would have probably had a song about it by the time they got back to Manchester. They would have thought it was hilarious. So I think it was just the way he did it, and the celebration as well. It's just thought it was brilliant. You know, there's that sort of, I'm here celebration. Yeah, like it was never in doubt kind of thing. You know, trust me, kind of thing.
I think he's fully cemented his place as Chelsea's penalty taker going forward. I think, until he misses, obviously, and then at which point, the Chelsea fans will be like, oh, it should have been Enzo that took it, or something along those lines. But, interestingly enough, Charlie, you say he's probably practiced against him at training. Cole Palmer come out and said that he doesn't actually practice penalties, which is bizarre at all. So, he doesn't practice penalties, but, I think he scored, 4 penalties now for Chelsea this season? Or was it 3?
Yeah.
4 out of 4. 100%. He's the new Jorginho. Tem, I wanted to ask you this question as well. Cole Palmer, I don't think, he left Manchester City because, he wasn't guaranteed first team football. I think it was in the press about Riyad Mahrez leaving Manchester City, and this was his opportunity to come and play more in the side, according to Pep. But he says, no, I want to leave, and they didn't want to hold him back, and he left. He left to go to join Chelsea to get more game time. But I think when we did sign him, I didn't expect him to get as much game time in the outset, and now it's kind of looking like Cole Palmer is looking like the player that we were expecting Kai Havertz to be when we initially signed him. Is that something you agree with, or do you think he just brings a different dynamic then compared to Kai Havertz when we first signed him?
I think so. I think Cole Palmer probably has a bit more suitability to play on the wing, whereas Kai, we sort of used him as a 10 centre mid, and then I think we tried to play him on the right as well, and then eventually ended up at centre forward. That he worked well with Timo Werner. I think they both brought the best out of each other's game, but I think the Havertz experiment itself has just completely failed at Chelsea. I think he never really found somewhere where he was completely comfortable, and I think it's more of a testament to Cole Palmer, his impact he's had on. He came here straight away, and he's probably looked like our best player, actually, apart from Gallagher and maybe Sterling. I think he's impacted us more than anyone thought. I don't think when we signed Palmer, anyone could have predicted of the impact he's had so far. And to have that calmness during that penalty and to just put it just above the keeper was great, and the celebration was great as well. So yeah, I think he's been a brilliant signing so far, and long it make it continue.
I mean, Charlie, with Cole Palmer as well. Like, do you think he was? Do you agree with the sentiment that Timber says? Like, he's not. It's weird. Like, he's not the finished article, but he looks like the finished article. I'm fairly certain if it was me and I was the manager, when I'm Mauricio Pochettino, I think he's the first name I put on the score the sheet every single week. It's him and Sterling. I think we haven't touched on Raheem Sterling, and what a game Raheem Sterling had yesterday. Taking on Kyle Walker, who's no slouch, and he had, he was turning him inside out. I think Raheem Sterling kind of played with like he had the points to prove, as did Cole Palmer, didn't he, Charlie?
Yeah, and I think that probably did help. Just the fact that we've got two ex-Man City players in our ranks who had a point to prove, like you say. But yeah, going back to Palmer, yeah, I mean, I think he has to start every game if he's fit on current form, obviously, providing he keeps it up. I think, like in terms of the depth that we've got, and I think I've gone into it before. There's a huge gulf between Mudryk and Sterling, for example, or Mudryk and Palmer and Madueke as well. From what we've seen this season, there is a huge gulf, and I think those two guys are probably more for the future and for the bench, and to be brought on to impact the game rather than starting too many matches, especially in the Premier League. I think these guys, that Sterling's obviously got the experience, relatively consistent. Obviously, he can be a bit hit and miss, but Palmer's just offers like this the way that he can. Everything seems to go through him in some way, and the way that he can pick the ball up from any part of the pitch and make something happen. He's very forward thinking as well, and he's able to do pretty much anything. He can pick out a pass, he can cross the ball. I'm sure he's fairly good in the air, I'm guessing. He looks like he should be. He looks quite tall to me from what I can see. But and he can score a goal. And look, I mean, people forget he nearly scored one of the goals of the season in that second half. He took on half the Man City team and was unlucky not to get that finish. I mean, that would have been. I mean, imagine if that goes in suddenly. That's he's. I mean, he did get an England call up today, didn't he? Which is nice to see.
He did, yeah.
But it really does cement him as a top player. So
yeah, I mean, we're now, chaps. We're halfway through. When we looked at our fixtures, we're halfway through the tough run of fixtures. Arsenal, Spurs, Brentford at home. Manchester City at home. We go to Newcastle next, and Brighton at home, and then Man United away. It's a tough run of fixtures. I think leading into this, I think the only thing that we thought where we probably could pick up points was against Brentford. It's the one game we haven't. We've got 5 points. We've not lost to any top 6 side this season yet so far in the league.
Villa.
Is Villa? Sorry, I do apologise, Villa. Yeah, well, they don't count. Anyway, they're not top 6 yet. They might be top 8. Top 8. I think Newcastle's sneaking into the top 7. But Villa, they might be the new top 8. We'll ignore Villa. But is there a renewed confidence in that scenario? 5 points out of 12 against those teams. We picked up the win against the club that we didn't expect to, really. Spurs, I think, fantastic run of form. But 5 points, still 3 games of these tough fixtures. How many points do you think we could pick up against Newcastle away, heavily overrun with injuries? Now's the time to take them. They're wounded. Brighton at home, and then Manchester United away. Could you see us potentially in the next game getting another 5 points from that? Do you think this is going to kickstart our season? Are we going to maybe look towards, Conference League? Look at eyeing that up at the very minimum? Anyone can jump in on that one.
I think Newcastle and Man United are going to be our toughest fixtures. I think Brighton we could beat. I think Newcastle will probably play with a defensive game plan. They're very, very solid defensively, so we have to be super clinical that game. I think from what we see in this season, those are the teams we struggle against, in fact. So it will be very important again to score the first goal. Man United's a tricky one. We could play them at any form, and they seem to beat us all the time. Yeah, we have sent you a stat. We haven't beaten them since 2018 when Morata scored that header. So again, they've been in a rut for many, many years and still managed to beat us or draw against us. So I think form goes out the window when it comes for us against Man United. I think it's just if we show up on the day and play well. So, but in terms of us pushing up further up the league, this is a great chance to play Newcastle, like you say, with the amount of injuries they have. Hopefully beat Brighton. If we do that, we're right in the mix for Conference League. We're right behind Man United, actually, if we beat the three teams you mentioned. So there is optimism to look forward to. It just depends if we can get the job done. And from what we've seen, we struggle against defensive teams. Hopefully, this run of form is going to teach us maybe to be a bit more clinical in front of goal and take those chances early when we have them in the first half. So let's see.
Yeah, and I think
Charlie, are you feeling optimistic? Could you see us gathering points?
Yeah, I am, but I think there is a question that's still over our head, which is, can we beat the lesser teams who do part the bus? Can we break teams down? Because we've kind of come to this realization that we play better, or it suits us more playing against these bigger teams, which has been evident. We've drawn with Liverpool, drawn with Arsenal, drawn with City now, beaten Tottenham. So those are 4 results that prove that, and then we lost to Forest and Brentford. Not that Brentford is that bad, but this season they're not that great, and so we're losing matches that we really shouldn't be, and we're having the same problems in that we can't break teams down. And I suppose it's just whether teams, once we get over this run of fixtures, because I think these 3 teams will give it to us a little bit more than other teams moving forward, but it's whether we can, the other teams, especially the ones coming to Stamford Bridge, if they're going to just sit back and play low block and all this sort of stuff, can we break them down? And that's I think once I've seen that a couple of times, once I've seen us get a couple of home results, especially against lesser opposition or like second tier opposition, like, I don't know, the likes of like Everton, Fulham, like these sort of like mid to bottom teams. I think once I've seen that a few times, then I will be quite confident. I mean, it's not too late for us to go on a charge. That's one thing, to be mindful. Aston Villa's a really good example actually of that for last season. If the season would have carried on 3 or 4 more games, they probably could have pushed for Champions League virtually. They're on that, they're on such a good run at the leading up to that, and you've got to remember they were in the relegation, so they're in probably a much worse position than we are right now at this time for them last season. So there's plenty of time to go on a charge, and obviously the advantage of playing this run of games is you get them out of the way. So we've got them out. We should have a relatively easy fixture list from now until the end of the season once we get these games out of the way, which is good. So yeah, there's room for optimism, but it's more a case of seeing rather than believing.
Yeah, and we will preview Newcastle away on next Monday's podcast at 9:30. But what we'll do is we'll wrap things up here, try and keep it to an hour. We greatly appreciate you for watching us here at the We Talk Chelsea podcast live on TKS TV. Make sure if you have found us, hit the subscribe button. It'll be fantastic to see you next week. We will be back next week at 9:30, where we will do a season review. So far, we're just under a third of a way through the season currently at the moment, and we will preview Newcastle away. But I greatly appreciate both chaps. We'll be back next week at 9:30 p.m. on Monday. Up the Chelsea.
Up the Chelsea.